My guest today is the Liverpool painter Frank Green, who will need very little introduction to many of our viewers. Hello, Frank.
Hello, Joe.
You've been painting Liverpool and documenting Liverpool, and sadly a lot of disappearing Liverpool, for 50 years. A previous guest on this programme, Fred O'Brien, who does memorial plaques, reckons nobody's painted Liverpool more than your good self. You paint every day?
Well, I try to, but in the last 6 months or so, I've had 2 exhibitions on, which have taken a lot of time up. So my production has diminished.
The thing is, it's a thing you wanted to do ever since you were at school. You were at Florence Melly, weren't you, juniors?
Yeah.
And right through your school time, you only ever wanted to draw or paint, and you've managed to actually sustain a living by doing that, which is amazing. You know, it's more than a hobby, it's a calling, as it were. And when you went to college, Liverpool College, you post-dated or pre-dated the John Lennon, Sutcliffe era?
Post-dated.
Post-dated that.
They left just before.
Was there still a sort of feeling of excitement around that they'd even been there, or hadn't it caught on yet?
Well, there was. I mean, I remember the people like the Cleaners as well talking about John Lennon and Cynthia. He said he was always playing his guitar, and Cynthia was always with him. That lady, I can't remember what her name is now, but...
Not June Furlong.
No, not June. No. June was there, obviously.
June was his muse, wasn't she? She used to get painted by him.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is that, you know, that was also your life's calling. And you had in those days your own heroes of artists who, prior to that, had established Liverpool in a fine art sort of way. Ironically, the building up of Liverpool, whereas a lot of your career has been concerned with what's disappeared. Just tell us about one or two of those early heroes.
Well, when I was at school, Joe, at Everett Avenue, I didn't know of any painters whatsoever. We had a good art teacher, and the only picture that was on the wall, there was a Lowry of Manchester Station, I think it was, and Modigliani. Didn't know who the hell Modigliani was, but I particularly liked those 2 pictures. But I knew of no artist when I started at the College of Art, apart from, and didn't even know his name, the pictures that were in all the libraries at the time, and they were the Herdman collection. And all the different libraries in Liverpool had a Herdman collection of pictures.
Of Liverpool?
Of the locality.
Yeah.
And Herdman actually did paint the disappearing Liverpool of the time, because all the old villages were disappearing. Everton Village, non-existent totally, the old Everton Village, and Herdman painted those and did reconstruction. Herdman was born in 1805, right. And when he was a very young child almost, he was going out drawing.
Now, let's just kill off one rumour right away. Everyone used to say, oh yes, Frank is our own L.S. Lowry. Well, I don't agree with that, because for 2 reasons. First of all, Liverpool was mainly a commercial city, not a city full of factories. So there's no chimney stacks and old factories. And secondly, your people, as and when they feature to give perspective or to give character to a painting, aren't stick people. You know, they're not Lowry-esque. I think what they mean, however, is the warmth that you bring to the architecture of Liverpool. You know, the idea of that you could step into a painting or be part of it. So would you agree with me that you're not Lowry too? You are very much your own person in that sense.
Yeah, I've always admired Lowry's work. I've always thought he was an outstanding artist who created his own language of painting. But I've never tried to copy anything to do with Lowry. I like the busyness of his pictures, which in fact in a lot of pictures I don't get, but
very often the people are to give perspective, aren't they, to something.
It's very difficult to actually put people in a painting, to relate them, get the size of the figure right, to actually relate the people to the picture. And as soon as you start putting a person in a picture as well, your eyes are immediately drawn to that person. So in a way, you've got to keep on as well. And put more
think
and more
of a couple of examples, though, where they're great for giving perspective or scale to something, to the size of the building or the foreground. One of my colleagues at the Echo, Paddy Shannon, interviewed Terence Davis, the filmmaker. You may know Terence. when he made one of his last great films about Liverpool, because he's recorded Liverpool filmically like you have in fine art. And one of the refrains, it was quite upsetting to read it really through the interview, was, "Oh, it's all disappeared. Oh, it's all disappeared." And a lot of your work you've even been known to rush out to get something down on canvas, knowing that it is going to disappear. And there's a famous picture by another ex-colleague of mine, Stephen Shakespeare, of you sitting in a vast open space of rubble, capturing the last moments of a street. But Terence Davies sounded quite heartbroken about this. Has it been it must be upsetting to see this happen.
I'll be honest, it has been as well, and especially when the demolition started to take place around Anfield Football Club. I was disgusted and very upset over that.
But what we mustn't be, unlike the Georgian Quarter, which is mainly preserved now, and we have more Georgian buildings than anywhere outside London and Bath. So notwithstanding that, has there ever been a danger of being over sentimental about these properties? In other words, A, were they all worth preserving, although there's whole communities been affected by their disappearance? And secondly, would people want to live in those sort of dwellings now?
That's a very good point, and I remember having an interview with the late Bob Azurdia, which it must be 25, 30 years ago now, and we discussed the same point, and I said nobody wants anybody to live in a house which is not environmentally friendly to the highest standards. So even though I've sort of regretted the demolition of a lot of houses, I think a lot of them could have been, at a fairly low cost, could have been brought up to a very high standard.
Right. There's one particular painting I can think of in one of your catalogues of a place called Venice Street, which is one of the old Welsh streets, which we'll talk about in the second half of the programme. But there's a picture of it, I think, in 2007 and one a year later. In the first picture, it's lived in. In the second one, it's all tinned up. All the windows are all tinned up. But it's the detail, Frank, that I find astonishing. You know, every brick and its cadences of colour, every cornice, every part of the building. Tremendous detail with a wonderful sense of perspective. You don't just sit down and do a painting like that. It must take hours.
Weeks.
Weeks even.
Of course it is, yeah. Well, it's like knitting a pullover. You just got to keep on with it. And but I was with those particular pictures around the football ground as well. One of the big problems is a lot of people had bought the houses or the housing associations, and they'd painted over the fine detailed brickwork. So with some of the streets I painted, it was quite a problem. I wanted to put them back as the builders had left them in the first place, had built them with this very nice pattern work of bricks.
That's right.
Yeah.
So did you have to use your imagination there where they'd been painted over?
Quite often, yeah. One particular street that I did was Donaldson Street, which is right opposite the Cop. And there were some houses hadn't been painted, the detail hadn't been painted over, but there was a continuing pattern work previously of beautiful pattern work going down the street.
Now, another thing you've painted a lot of are churches, and may I congratulate you, you're one of the few people I know who's painted Liverpool Anglican Cathedral correctly, as I say, because in architecture they have this thing called the angle of batter, and Liverpool Anglican Cathedral Tower actually slopes in at a ratio of 1:80, and a lot of people paint it as just one big stack, one big square block. So it's having an eye for detail like that, and these wonderful perspectives down streets as well. Is that just that is a natural gift, isn't it? You either can do it or you can't.
Well, when I started painting, Joe, and painting pictures of streets, I found a lot of difficulty doing some of these perspectives. But
Did you have to redo some of them?
I had to just work away until I got it right. And the thing is, there's a perspective as well, probably the mathematical perspective, I don't know. But there's also the perspective that the way we perceive things. And sometimes you've got to alter the drawing. I mean, if you're too close to a drawing, like the collegiate here, the perspectives can be, when you come to draw that thing, in the way you're looking at it, unless you alter the thing, it doesn't look natural. So,
The other thing is, you know, with these paintings, they become a sort of permanent record that perhaps isn't available in photographs. Remember Hardman's famous pictures of Liverpool?
Yeah.
Well, these are a historical record as well. Are you conscious of that when you're doing it?
Well, I am, but in the first place, I've done them as paintings, and I've tried to bring an artist's eye to the painting when I've been looking at the subject. The greatest recorder of Liverpool views is was a man called Stan Roberts, who you can see on these websites, all these photographs of Liverpool. Majority of these photographs were taken in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s were by Stan Roberts. And he was a true recorder, Stan Roberts.
Did you take some of those as subjects?
No, but I got to know Stan Roberts when I was out painting
Right.
in Everton. And Stan worked for the post office telephones. And every dinner time he came out, excuse me, came out with his map. And he knew exactly which streets were going to be knocked down and were due for demolition. And he recorded every one of them very, very faithfully.
Right, well, what we'll do in the second half after the break is talk about some other aspects of your art which have taken you abroad and even included the tall ships and other things like that.
Yep.
So do join us then and we'll look at the other art of Frank Green. Welcome back. My guest today is the Liverpool painter Frank Green, and we spoke in the first part of the programme about his paintings of many Liverpool streets and monuments, many of which have disappeared now. But there's another side to Frank. First of all, he speaks fluent Welsh. His wife, Meryl, came to Liverpool from the Nancy Valley in Snowdonia to have a teaching career here. And you still have a family home at Pontrieg, which is inland from Carnarvon towards Snowdon, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
So there's the country Frank as well as the city Frank. And then in the middle period, I just want to sort of mention in passing, you won a scholarship to go and paint in, you ended up painting in Paris and Naples and exotic places like that, and the Italian coast. A different type of art emerged there, didn't it? It was softer, more rural, sort of gentle art. I mean, but then you still came back to Liverpool. That middle period, we'll call it. What was the significance of it to you to this day? What do you remember most?
Well, the great thing about it, Liverpool Education Committee gave a travelling scholarship, and Charlie Burton, who was head of the fine art department, recommended me for one of these travelling scholarships. That was in 1964-65. And it gave you enough money to travel to a recognised arts centre in Europe. Well, I didn't go to a recognised arts centre. I'd seen a travel brochure for the Amalfi Coast, and I thought, I've got to go and paint there. And
the light in those southern Mediterranean places, rather like the paintings of Cézanne or whatever, the light is different, isn't it? Very much conscious of that, are you?
I am.
The daylight.
The daylight, yeah.
It's a different quality.
I went in 1965, just for a couple of months, 3 months. And before I went there, I'd seen the work of Corot in Paris. And Corot is one of my absolutely great heroes, absolutely wonderful paintings of Italy painted. And then I only worked in oil at that time. And second time I went to Italy was 1968, and I went to Umbria. And it was quite a fluke that I actually started painting watercolours, just because of the inconvenience of lugging wet oil paintings around the hillsides. So we started, I was with a friend of mine from Liverpool, the late Richard Wash, and we were a great competition for each other, and we both produced something like 550 watercolours in the near to 8 months period. We were just out from morning till night. And a lot of the pictures are in the exhibition.
But there's, I've seen some of your paintings from Paris, for instance, drawings and paintings, and there's a sort of romantic feel to them. One wouldn't say that about the Liverpool paintings in the sense that they're not like holiday brochure paintings, are they? But these ones were. And then you say you started working in watercolour. Is that now your preferred medium?
Certainly, I've done more watercolours than anything else. I found it very difficult to paint Liverpool in watercolour in 1968 when I came back from Italy. I made a few attempts, but with the demolition going on, I couldn't get the depth of colour. I wasn't experienced enough to get the depth of colour in watercolour.
That you could get with oil?
No, in the end I used, well, whatever, if you use watercolour or you used to begin with, or I used oil painting, the pictures were covered in thick dust from the demolition.
As you were doing them?
Oh, yes, yeah, it's just incredible. I wore so many watercolour brushes out because the dust from the demolition would land on the plate. I use a plate as a palette. And the fine points on the brush would just wear away. And so I started to use Conte crayon, which is like a sort of fairly greasy crayon, brown and black Conte crayon. And I did lots of big drawings of the demolition scenes in Everton using Conte crayon.
Did you ever think there was a sort of political edge to this? I mean, you were chronicling the change of Liverpool. I know you were involved in a campaign at one time when the city council started cutting down trees in the park. I think it was cedar trees, wasn't it?
Black poplar.
Black poplar trees.
Yeah.
Now,
there's a line of 47 of them.
That had gone.
Most of them were gone.
Did you do it for that sort of reason, or was again just monitoring what was going on? But I mean, was there like people wrote plays to get things done? Was there a political edge to your art in terms of campaigning, maybe?
Well, over Stanley Park, certainly.
Right.
I just thought it was an absolutely disgusting thing that parks, which had been given to the people or that were owned by the people into perpetuity, that was the whole thing about it, that the council felt that they could just give these away. They belong to the people.
Well, talking about what the council did in the late 60s, you'll recall this, I recall it, and many of the viewers will. The centre was knocked out of Liverpool itself, around the Queen Square area, and we had the St John's precinct built, and the big tower, which is now Radio City Tower. I think it's 1969 that went up. Yeah. And then they tried to rebuild very badly, I think, Queen Square, with a lot of clutter. So you had, next to St George's Hall and William Brown Street and the great facades, historic facades, you had this very damaged area of Liverpool. And it was done for political reasons. In those days, they thought it was almost post-communist inspiration. They thought it was egalitarian Liverpool to do away with a lot of these older buildings which represented some sort of imperialism, and to plant, and this happened in Birmingham, it happened in Newcastle, it wasn't just Liverpool. It was the thinking of Labour councils at the time to make city centres more egalitarian and replace them with, which is dreadful really. What are your feelings about what's gone around there, around the Stork Hotel area and all those areas?
Well, I think it's a real pity because if those buildings have been renovated properly, and the square, Queen Square, because at one time Queen Square used to house a lot of the fruit market people. It was always a fascinating place to go around.
Used to be a woman there used to shout out, "Buy me last lettuce and I'll give you two."
Oh.
They were great characters, weren't they? Early morning fruit market.
Yeah.
And the cobble streets and the gas lamps, and that's all gone. Did you chronicle that area?
No,
at the
I
time?
didn't. No,
you didn't.
I did. In the exhibition now, there's a few sort of slight drawings around there, but I didn't do it.
And there was the great Welsh influence, wasn't there, in building in parts of Liverpool, around Dingle and stuff. And very briefly, the Welsh streets, as we call them, but the influence of Welsh builders and Welsh speaking, and now you speak Welsh, of course, you remember from childhood. You're hearing Welsh being spoken in Liverpool, and even a suggestion by one of the builders that Liverpool should become the capital of Wales.
Oh, yeah, that was Owen Elias, I think, made that suggestion. But he was one of the great...
Stedsford in Birkenhead once, didn't we?
Well, that was 1915, I think, wasn't it?
So there is that. Is that influence still here, the Welsh influence? We have the Welsh Choral Union still.
There is a certain amount of influence on that. It's not as strong, obviously, as it was, But the Welsh builders were a major force of builders in Liverpool. And when the people talk about the Welsh streets, virtually the whole of Liverpool, Bootle, Garston,
Was it Welsh
Dingle,
slate they were using?
the slate from North Wales, yeah, on the
Llanberis,
roofing,
yeah.
and lots of the bricks came from North Wales. They came from lots of the brickworks were in Anglesey, and then I think a lot of the Welsh builders actually owned brickworks on the Wirral as well.
Well, where
And
do
the
you
Wirral is same. That's another place almost totally built by Welshmen.
where do you think of as home now? You're in Pontrigue, of course. We've mentioned that, a living house. Obviously, Liverpool, you are a Scouser. You spend a lot of time here. Your most recent exhibition at St George's Hall, you've been based here while that's been on. How do you think of yourself now as a sort of dual person, part Welsh, part Scouse?
Probably schizophrenic, probably. But I've been married to my wife now for 39 years, so there's no escape, Joe.
You've done quite a lot of painting also around Snowdonia, haven't you, of mountains and lakes?
Yeah, a fair amount. Not as much as I should have done. I really have concentrated my efforts on Liverpool. Really.
And yeah, having done it for over 50 years, will you continue to do that? I mean,
Yeah,
no signs of retirement or the
no.
job being fit. No sense of the job of Liverpool being finished in that sense.
No, we talked before about whether I found it upsetting at all.
Yes.
And at one stage I thought, I can't carry on doing this. When the first plans came to demolish lots of Anfield, I had different ideas on the whole thing. I did suggest to one of the chief executives of Liverpool City Council, that the area should have been a conservation area. And that would, because I don't think anybody had done a proper visual survey of what was there. And you can see by Liverpool's football ground, Skerries Road, that was due for demolition, Skerries Road, to expand Liverpool Football Club. Then suddenly when the park business came, Liverpool Football Club moving to the park, Skerries Road was surplus to requirements at that time. So miraculously, it was renovated then. And yet the documents from the council, it's not fit for the 21st century. You know, we're in the 21st century now. The houses are beautiful.
Well, I'm sure lots of people have got. I've got a Frank Green painting. I've got St Mary's Kirkdale. You were wondering where that had got to. I bought that in the 1970s. You've now got a lot of your work available in prints, as well as the originals. So people do collect these in that sense. And for many more years, I hope we will continue to do that, Frank. Yeah. And thank you for what has been a fascinating insight, really, into your international art, no less, although obviously people connect you with Liverpool. And may you have many more happy years of painting, and we'll have to see, you know, what that brings. And, you know, like Mozart, keep working right up to the end. Well, thank you very much for joining us this week, and I look forward to seeing you in the near future.